My friend Julie has a blog, and on it she posts these awesome photos that she takes of flowers and plants, and most of them are just in her backyard or at local parks. And I've linked to her blog on the website, so if you're listening to this on the podcast, you might check the website and find a link to her blog. And I really like her photos, and I thought, well, surely I've taken a few photos like that. And I look back through my weekly 50 photos, and no, I really haven't. I mean, every now and then I got a picture of a flower. And there's some plants, I guess. I have a lot of nature type stuff, but man, I don't really have a lot of photos of flowers. And I thought I got to fix that. Flowers are cool. They're everywhere. And so it's kind of fun to take pictures of them. So I went out the other day specifically with the purpose of taking pictures of some flowers. And I saw these cornflowers, or no, they're not cornflowers. They're coneflowers, not cornflowers. That's a whole different thing. They're coneflowers, and I got some decent shots, and I came back and was looking through them in Lightroom, and I wasn't really happy with any of them. And it dawned on me why. It was because of the mid-afternoon sun. There was all these washed out colors. I think that I took those photos at maybe 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and so in a really not cloudy day. And so there were all these harsh shadows and the colors were way too bright, and it just wasn't working. I fiddled around in Lightroom and it just, I couldn't get good results. I really wasn't pleased with any of the pictures I took. So I came back a few days later to the same spot, the same flowers. I think this might be a different cluster of individual flowers, but the difference was it was a cloudy day, and I think this is maybe 10 a.m. on a cloudy day. And I shot some similar types of pictures, but I was way happier with the result. You can see this has rich, vibrant purples and oranges, and it stands out nicely against the rich green background. I'm super happy with the way the colors turned out in this. I like that I was able to frame it such that your eye is drawn initially to this first flower on the right, and then you see there's more to it. There's a couple of flowers behind it, physically behind it. In fact, there's the one lower, if you start at the right and work your way to the left, the next flower you see is behind it, and then the next flower is actually in the foreground. And so I like that you have this nice, this very shallow depth of field, and you get a sense of foreground and background here. And you also have these green lines on the right, these angled green lines that sort of draw your eye into the picture as a whole. I was really pleased with how this turned out in terms of composition. I used f1.8, which is the max aperture of my lens, my 50mm lens, to get the foreground, or to get the tall flower right in focus, with the foreground and the background flowers a little bit blurry. I could have gone smaller to f2.8, I suppose, or smaller, but I specifically wanted that effect. This is also shot at ISO 200 on aperture priority, so I let the camera figure out the shutter speed, which turned out to be 1/640th of a second. And I had to shift around. I was laying on my stomach on the concrete right next to these flowers, and I had to shift around to get the right elements in the background that I wanted. So it took a little bit of doing to get this particular photo. I actually went out walking with a few coworkers. One of them said, "Hey, let's try this one over here." And sure enough, she was right. This looked, it worked out fine. My takeaway from this, there's a couple takeaways actually that I want to mention. The first is, and you've heard me say this a couple times on Weekly 50, know your settings and know what they're doing to your photo and know how controlling them will affect your image. And I'm talking the three basics, the three basics of exposure: aperture, shutter, and ISO. If you know those three and know how to control them to get the result you want, you will increase your photography skills dramatically, exponentially. And if you leave your camera on auto, you might take good pictures, but you won't know how to improve those pictures because you didn't control the settings on your camera to get that picture. Your camera did, and you might have made a different choice than your camera did on auto. So to get this one flower in focus, I use specific settings. If you went out and shot the same thing in auto, chances are it would look way different because the camera would decide something else because the camera doesn't know what I'm going for. So know your settings and know how to alter them to get the shot you want. I've also posted a link to that original image that I mentioned, the first one that I just wasn't quite happy with. I posted a link to that on my blog. And if you look down at the bottom of the post for this, you'll see a link to that. And if you look at the colors and the shadows, you'll see that it's not a very good photo. And the lesson there is, to get really good photos, one thing you can do is not take photos in the harsh sunlight. So look for a cloudy day or find some way of toning down the light a little bit. And you can sort of compare this photo and the other one to get an example for what that means. Another thing I want to mention is that the first photo, and again, you can see it by clicking that link on the blog, it was taken with my D7100, a $1,000 camera. This photo that you're looking at now was taken with my D200, which is about 10 years old, and it sells for about $250 used. I say this a lot, but I mean it. It's not the camera, usually, but it's the lens and the photographer that make all the difference. You don't need a fancy camera to get a really nice shot. If you look at the photo that I linked to that was taken with my D7100, that's the best that I got from that particular day. And it's terrible compared to this one. The camera doesn't matter most of the time. What matters are these other things like the fundamentals of exposure and knowing how to position yourself and knowing how to frame your subject and all these other things. Practice, practice, practice. Go out with your camera and just practice taking pictures. It doesn't matter if you don't have the newest, greatest camera. Just get out there and shoot. Also, the final lesson, and I know this is going a little long, but the final lesson I want to mention is that no amount of post-processing can fix a photo that was poorly composed to begin with. No amount of post-processing can fix that other one that I've linked to, and if the image isn't great to begin with, no Instagram filter or photoshopping or anything like that can really fix it compared to a photo that's just better from the start, better composition and better framing. So learn those fundamentals, learn the fundamentals of exposure, and learn how to see your subject, learn how to frame your subject, learn how to compose the picture. Post-processing can wait. These other things are generally a lot more important.